Eden's Enigma, the mystery of the four rivers. Welcome, seekers of ancient mysteries, to Beyond the Veil. I'm Radzi, and today we're diving into one of the most perplexing geographical enigmas in biblical history, a puzzle that has confounded scholars, archaeologists, and theologians for centuries. Before we embark on this journey through time and terrain, if you're new here, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. This ensures you'll be alerted whenever we unveil new mysteries from humanity's distant past. And if you're a returning explorer, welcome back to the expedition. Imagine for a moment that you're holding an ancient map, one that claims to show the location of humanity's birthplace, the legendary Garden of Eden. The directions seem clear enough. Find the place where a single river splits into four mighty waterways. Two of these rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, still flow today. But the other two? They've seemingly vanished from the face of the earth. This is the riddle that has sent countless explorers and scholars on wild quests across continents. How could four major rivers, the Pishon, Gihon, Hiddekel, and Euphrates, all originate from a single source when this defies everything we know about how rivers actually behave in nature? What if I told you that the answer might involve vanished waterways, tectonic shifts that reshaped entire continents, and a geographical reality that existed before the world as we know it took shape? Today I pose this question: if the four rivers of Eden cannot be reconciled with our modern geography, what might this tell us about the world that existed before our own? Let's find out. To understand this mystery, we must first return to the source, Genesis 2:10-14. The text reads, "A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into four headwaters. The name of the first is the Pishon. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of that land is good. Aromatic resin and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris. It runs along the east side of Ashur. And the fourth river is the Euphrates." Now, if you've ever studied river systems, you'll immediately notice something peculiar about this description. Rivers don't typically split from a single source into multiple streams. They do the opposite. Tributaries join together to form larger rivers. It's as if Genesis is describing a river system that's running backward, like claiming water flows uphill. This hydrological impossibility is our first clue that something extraordinary is being described. Let's break down what we know for certain. The Euphrates and Tigris rivers still exist today, flowing through modern Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. These two we can pinpoint with confidence. But the Pishon and Gihon, they've become the geographical equivalent of Bigfoot, much discussed, occasionally cited, but never conclusively proven to exist. And herein lies our first major mystery. How could two major rivers mentioned in one of history's most influential texts simply vanish from the earth? Let's start with what we can verify. The Euphrates River, or Perat in Hebrew, is the longest and one of the most historically significant rivers in Western Asia, flowing approximately 1,700 miles from eastern Turkey through Syria and Iraq. It eventually joins the Tigris to form the Shatt al-Arab, which empties into the Persian Gulf. Throughout history, the Euphrates has been a cradle of civilization. The ancient Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians all built their mighty empires along its banks. Its waters have witnessed the rise and fall of countless kingdoms, making it not just a geographical feature, but a timeline of human history. The Tigris River, believed to be the biblical Hiddekel, runs roughly parallel to the Euphrates. This identification comes from the book of Daniel, where the prophet describes standing on the bank of the great river, the Tigris, during the Babylonian captivity. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Radzi, if we know where two of the rivers are, can't we just look at where they originate and find Eden? If only it were that simple. Today, the Tigris and Euphrates have separate sources in the mountains of eastern Turkey, roughly 40 miles apart. They don't split from a common source as Genesis describes, and that's just the beginning of our geographical conundrum. What's more, the biblical text describes the Hiddekel as flowing east of Assyria, but the historical region of Assyria was centered around the upper Tigris. The river flows through it, not east of it. This suggests either a different understanding of Assyria's boundaries in biblical times, or that the Hiddekel might not be the modern Tigris after all. These discrepancies remind us that we're not just dealing with geography, but with an ancient text describing a world that may have looked very different from our own. Now we come to the real enigmas, the Pishon and Gihon rivers, which have sparked debates among scholars for millennia. The Pishon is described as winding through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. This gives us two geographical clues. We need to find a river connected to a gold-rich region called Havilah. Sounds straightforward enough, right? Except that we're not entirely sure where Havilah was. Various scholars have placed it in Arabia, Ethiopia, India, and even Turkey. The renowned Jewish commentator Rashi identified the Pishon as the Nile River, noting that the name suggests gushing forth and overflowing, which describes the Nile's annual flooding. He also connected it to the Egyptian flax industry, as the Hebrew word Pishtan means flax. Others, like the 1st century historian Josephus, identified the Pishon as the Ganges River in India. This view was supported by Yonatan ben Uziel, who translated Havilah as Hinki, or India in Aramaic. More recently, satellite imaging has revealed a fascinating discovery: a dried riverbed running from the western mountains of Saudi Arabia toward Kuwait. This fossil river has been dry since approximately 3,500 to 2000 BCE, potentially aligning with the biblical timeline. Imagine that. A river mentioned in Genesis that actually existed but has been invisible to the naked eye for thousands of years until space-age technology revealed its ghostly outline. The Gihon presents similar challenges. Genesis tells us it winds through the entire land of Cush, traditionally associated with Ethiopia. This has led many scholars to identify the Gihon with the Blue Nile, which begins in Ethiopia's Lake Tana. But here's where it gets really interesting. If the Gihon is the Blue Nile, and the Pishon is possibly the White Nile or another branch, how could these possibly connect with the Tigris and Euphrates thousands of miles away? Unless, of course, the world's geography was dramatically different in the distant past. And that, my friends, is exactly what some researchers propose. Let's address the elephant in the room, or perhaps I should say, the river flowing uphill in the room. In nature, rivers begin from a source, typically in highlands or mountains, and flow downward, with smaller tributaries joining to form larger waterways. What Genesis describes is the opposite: one river splitting into 4 separate heads or major rivers. This pattern simply doesn't occur in nature, at least not with major river systems. Deltas can form multiple channels, but these are at a river's end, not its beginning, and they don't form separate major rivers that flow for hundreds of miles. This fundamental discrepancy has led scholars to propose several explanations. One is that the biblical description is symbolic rather than literal. perhaps representing Eden as the source of life-giving waters that nourish the four corners of the earth. But for those seeking a literal geographical location, we must consider another possibility, that the physical geography of the Middle East has changed dramatically since the time Genesis was written. The Middle East sits at the intersection of three major tectonic plates: the Arabian, African, and Eurasian. The movement of these plates over millennia has created the Great Rift Valley system, which runs from Turkey through the Dead Sea and Red Sea and deep into Africa. This tectonic activity has literally torn landscapes apart, creating new seas, valleys, and mountain ranges. Rivers that once flowed continuously could have been severed, their courses dramatically altered. What if the four rivers of Eden did once flow from a common source, but tectonic shifts, climate change, and other geological processes have completely reshaped the landscape, leaving us with a geographical puzzle that seems impossible to solve with modern maps? This isn't just wild speculation. The fossil record shows that the climate and geography of the Middle East have changed dramatically over the past 10,000 years. Areas that are now desert were once lush and well-watered. Rivers that now flow year-round were once seasonal, and some that have disappeared entirely once carved mighty channels through the landscape. The world described in Genesis may be literally beneath our feet, buried under millennia of geological change. Over centuries of scholarship, four major theories have emerged about Eden's possible location. Let's examine each one. First, the Mesopotamian theory places Eden somewhere in modern-day Turkey or Iraq, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers originate relatively close to each other. Proponents argue that the biblical Hiddekel and Euphrates are clearly the modern Tigris and Euphrates, and that the other two rivers might have been tributaries or branches that have since disappeared or changed course. The problem? As we've discussed, the Tigris and Euphrates don't share a common source, and there's no evidence they ever did. Plus, identifying the Pishon and Gihon remains problematic in this region. The Arabian Peninsula theory suggests Eden was located somewhere in modern-day Saudi Arabia or Yemen. This theory gained traction with the discovery of the fossil river that once flowed across Saudi Arabia. Yemen is particularly interesting because it has historically been known for gold and onyx, matching the biblical description of Havilah. The eastward trending fault branch from the Afar Triangle south of Yemen could have formed a natural riverbed before sea levels rose after the last ice age. The Egyptian theory, proposed by some scholars, including the paper I found during my research, places Eden in Egypt, with the four rivers connected to the Nile system and the ancient concept of the Oceanus River that was believed to encircle the world. This theory has the advantage of connecting to one of the world's most famous rivers, but struggles to explain the connection to the Tigris and Euphrates. Finally, the Great Rift Valley theory suggests that all four rivers were once connected to this massive geological feature that runs from Turkey to Mozambique. The Bible tends to indicate that the river from Eden originated in the Holy Land, and from there became four heads. This theory proposes that before the formation of the Red Sea Rift, a relatively recent geological event, rivers flowed both north and south from the highlands of what is now Israel and Jordan. The northward rivers became the Tigris and Euphrates, while the southward rivers flowed into Africa, potentially connecting to the Nile system. What's fascinating about this theory is that it aligns with geological evidence of major changes to the region's hydrology over the past 10,000 years. The formation of the Red Sea Rift literally tore apart landscapes that were once connected, potentially separating river systems that once shared common highlands. Each of these theories has strengths and weaknesses. and none perfectly resolves all the geographical puzzles. Perhaps that's why the search for Eden continues to captivate us. It's a mystery that touches on both our spiritual origins and the physical history of our planet. To truly understand the mystery of Eden's rivers, we need to think in geological timescales. The world described in Genesis may have existed during or shortly after the last ice age, which ended roughly 11,700 years ago. During the ice age, vast amounts of water were locked up in glaciers and ice sheets, causing sea levels to be much lower than they are today, up to 400 feet lower. Coastlines extended much further out, and areas that are now underwater were dry land. The Sahara itself was once a savanna with numerous lakes and rivers. Rock art from this period depicts hippos, crocodiles, and other water-dependent animals in areas that haven't seen significant rainfall in thousands of years. But perhaps the most dramatic changes came from tectonic activity. The Great Rift System that runs from Turkey through the Red Sea and into Africa is an active zone where the Earth's crust is literally being pulled apart. Think of it as Earth's version of continental divorce. Landscapes that were once united have been separating at a rate of roughly 1 inch per year. Over thousands of years, this adds up to significant change. The formation of the Red Sea Rift is particularly relevant to our mystery. Geological evidence suggests that the Red Sea began forming around 30 million years ago, but the process accelerated significantly in more recent geological time. This rifting process could have dramatically altered river systems in the region. When we combine these factors, sea level changes, climate shifts, and tectonic activity, we begin to see how a river system described in ancient texts might be unrecognizable today. Rivers that once flowed continuously could have been severed by rifting, their courses altered by climate change, or their lower reaches submerged by rising seas. The world described in Genesis may not be mythical, it may simply be lost beneath the waves or transformed beyond recognition by the relentless forces that shape our planet. While we've been exploring geographical theories, we should acknowledge that many scholars interpret the 4 rivers symbolically rather than literally. In ancient Near Eastern thought, 4 was a number representing completeness or universality, the 4 directions, 4 winds, 4 corners of the earth. The 4 rivers might represent the life-giving waters of Eden, nourishing the entire known world. Some medieval maps actually depicted Jerusalem at the center of the world, with 4 rivers flowing outward to the 4 corners of the earth. This wasn't meant as literal geography, but as spiritual cosmology. Eden as the source of divine blessing flowing to all creation. Of course, these symbolic interpretations don't help us much if we're trying to find Eden on Google Maps. But they remind us that ancient texts often operated on multiple levels of meaning simultaneously. Hebrew scholars have also found deeper meanings in the rivers' names. Pishon is connected to the root word meaning to increase or overflow. Gihon relates to bursting forth. Hiddekel suggests swift or rapid, and Euphrates or Perat means fruitfulness or sweet water. Together, these names paint a picture of abundant, life-giving waters, perfect for the paradise described in Genesis. Whether or not we can locate these rivers on a modern map, their symbolic significance is clear. Some Jewish mystical traditions go even further, seeing the 4 rivers as representing different aspects of divine wisdom flowing into creation. The rivers become metaphors for how the infinite divine presence manifests in our finite world. These symbolic readings don't necessarily contradict geographical interpretations. Ancient texts often layered multiple meanings. The rivers could be both real geographical features and rich symbols of spiritual truths. Perhaps the enduring power of Eden's story lies precisely in this multi-layered quality. It speaks simultaneously to our physical origins and our spiritual nature. Modern technology has revolutionized our ability to peer into the past. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and other remote sensing techniques allow us to see features that are invisible to the naked eye, including ancient riverbeds that have been dry for millennia. The discovery of the Kuwait River, or Wadi al-Batin system, through satellite imaging is particularly fascinating. This ancient river once flowed from the western mountains of Saudi Arabia toward Kuwait, through what is now mostly desert. Some researchers propose this could be the biblical Pishon. Similarly, the Wadi Sirhan, another dry riverbed system in northern Saudi Arabia, has been proposed as a candidate for one of Eden's rivers. These fossil rivers remind us that the Arabian Peninsula once had a much more extensive hydrological system than it does today. Archaeological excavations have also revealed ancient settlements along these now dry riverbeds, confirming that they once supported human populations. The climate and landscape of the Arabian Peninsula 6,000, 10,000 years ago were dramatically different from today's arid environment. Core samples from the Persian Gulf have provided another intriguing piece of evidence. They suggest that prior to around 8,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower, the Persian Gulf was a lush, low-lying valley with a river running through it. Some scholars have proposed that this valley, now submerged, could have been the location of Eden. Imagine that, the Garden of Eden, potentially lying beneath the waters of the Persian Gulf. It brings new meaning to the idea of a lost paradise. Archaeological work in Mesopotamia has also revealed extensive evidence of climate change over the past 10,000 years. Areas that once supported agriculture and large populations gradually became more arid, forcing adaptations and migrations. These findings remind us that the world described in ancient texts was in a state of flux, changing climate, shifting river courses, rising sea levels. The geography familiar to the earliest human civilizations may have already been significantly different from the world of their ancestors just a few thousand years earlier. Modern science, far from disproving ancient accounts, is giving us new tools to understand how they might reflect genuine geographical knowledge of a world that has since been transformed by natural processes. You might be wondering, why does this ancient geographical puzzle matter? Why have scholars, explorers, and the faithful spent centuries trying to locate rivers mentioned in a text written thousands of years ago? I believe this search matters on multiple levels. First, it represents our deep human desire to connect with our origins, to understand where we came from and how our story began. Eden represents our collective memory of beginnings, of a time when humanity was in harmony with nature and the divine. Second, the search for Eden's rivers stands at the fascinating intersection of faith, science, and historical inquiry. It reminds us that these domains need not be in conflict. Ancient texts can contain genuine historical and geographical knowledge, even if that knowledge is framed in ways that differ from modern scientific discourse. Third, this mystery highlights how profoundly our planet has changed, even within the span of human civilization. Rivers have changed course, seas have risen, fertile lands have become deserts. Understanding these changes gives us perspective on our current environmental challenges. And finally, let's be honest, who doesn't love a good mystery? The search for Eden's rivers has all the elements of a great detective story. Ancient clues, missing evidence, competing theories, and the tantalizing possibility that the answer has been hiding in plain sight all along. But perhaps the deepest significance lies in what this search reveals about human nature itself. We are, at our core, meaning-seeking creatures. We want our geography to connect to our spirituality, our physical origins to align with our metaphysical understanding of ourselves. The enduring fascination with Eden's rivers speaks to this quintessentially human quality, our desire to map not just the physical world, but but the landscape of meaning that gives our lives purpose and direction. As we conclude our exploration of Eden's enigmatic rivers, I'd like to leave you with a reflective question to ponder. If the geography of our world can change so dramatically within the span of human history, what might this suggest about the permanence of our current world and our responsibility toward it? The search for Eden's rivers reminds us that landscapes we consider eternal, mighty rivers, mountain ranges, even seas, are actually in flux when viewed through the lens of geological time. The world described in ancient texts may be unrecognizable today, not because those texts were wrong, but because the earth itself has changed. Perhaps the most profound lesson from this mystery is one of perspective. We tend to see the world as fixed and unchanging, but it is actually in constant transformation. Rivers change course, climates shift, seas rise and fall. What appears impossible in today's geography might have been reality in yesterday's world. This perspective can be humbling, but also empowering. It reminds us that we are part of an ongoing story, one in which the physical world and human understanding of it continue to evolve together. Whether or not we ever definitively locate the 4 rivers of Eden, the search itself enriches our understanding of both ancient texts and the dynamic planet we call home. And in that sense, perhaps the journey is as valuable as the destination. We've traveled across continents and millennia today, following the courses of rivers both known and mysterious. We've seen how the biblical description of Eden's 4 rivers presents a geographical puzzle that continues to challenge our understanding of ancient texts and Earth's history. If you've enjoyed this journey through time and terrain, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell. Your support allows us to continue exploring the mysteries that connect our past to our present. And now, I'd like to close with an affirmation that captures the spirit of our exploration today. I invite you to repeat it with me if you feel so inclined. I am part of an unfolding story, connected to ancient rivers of wisdom that continue to flow through time. Let's say that together once more. I am part of an unfolding story, connected to ancient rivers of wisdom that continue to flow through time. And one final time. I am part of an unfolding story, connected to ancient rivers of wisdom that continue to flow through time. Until next time, this is Radzi for Beyond the Veil, reminding you that sometimes the greatest mysteries aren't hidden in distant stars or parallel dimensions. They're flowing right beneath our feet in the ancient rivers that have shaped both our planet and our stories.